So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders, their backgrounds, their successes and challenges, and what really drives them forward. And today I'm really delighted to have with us Julia Szajdzicka, who's the Managing Director of ND Metering Solutions. So Julia, firstly, thanks so much for coming on board and spending some time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and ND Metering Solutions to the audience and how you help your clients, that would be great.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a pleasure. So our company was started in the 1970s, so we've been around for over 50 years. And the purpose of our products are to enable organisations of any type and size all over the world to reduce their energy consumption. So first of all, you can benefit by not spending so much on energy, which is always a great selling point for most companies, I find. And then the flip side of that is, of course, that where you save money, you also reduce your impact on the environment. So you're reducing the carbon embedded in your operations. And this is obviously becoming increasingly important. I'm not used to adding the third thread, which I've just decided to add just this second, which of course is the security issue. Because right now we are under attack. I know we aren't directly under attack, but we are all engaged in this fight against Putin.
Yep.
And obviously energy security has become a very, very hot topic. Yep. So again, if you want to do your bit for Ukraine, you don't necessarily have to use meters, but please, think about reducing your energy consumption. So we have a factory in Bradford with our sales offices. And we've been based there for the entire time. We've never outsourced our manufacturing abroad, which is what all our competitors do. It's all made from component level up in our factory in the UK. So we have all our own staff who are fully trained, very experienced, and people tend to come along and stay, well, for the rest of their working lives. People tend to retire when they're going to leave. So we have an SMT machine. So we get the components in and we manufacture everything ourselves. And they're also designed by us, the firmware and the hardware. And the meters are basically what they do is they're installed on sub-distribution panels inside the building. So just for anybody who doesn't know what a sub-meter does, you will have a main incoming meter, which will tell the utility company how much you've used.
Yep.
But that tends to be for the entire building. So if
Yep.
you want to understand how you've ended up with that massive bill and even check it to make sure it's correct, which is always a good thing to do, you then have to really measure what's happening on a disaggregated level. So at the sub-distribution boards, you'll have fuses maybe for different floors or different departments or different ways of using energy. It might be the lighting, the power, the HVAC, or whatever it is. And what we find is that where they're installed, they tend to pay for themselves quite quickly because they give you real-time, accurate visibility of your energy consumption, right, which is then communicated to some software, which we don't do. Someone else does that. And you can look at that if you really are very interested all day, every day, because it's basically happening in real time. So literally, if you were, for some strange reason, to connect one of those to the power to your kettle and you turned your kettle on, you could literally sit in your office and watch the power consumption going up and then dropping off as the switch clicked, because and you could pop down and make your coffee. But that's not a very well cost-effective way of working out when your kettle has boiled. But that's effectively what we do, and we export them all over the world. So they're installed even in Antarctica, they're on ships, they're on railway stations, they're in factories and shops and doctor surgeries, university campuses, from America all the way to China. There probably are some in Ukraine. There might have been a few installed in Russia, but we're not shipping there for obviously regions at the moment. So, but yes, Vietnam, South America, you name it. So the critical thing, of course, is quality and accuracy, because if you're going to put these in, you're making an investment. And it's the analogy I use is a ruler. If you were to buy a ruler and somebody had decided to put the increments on the ruler slightly spaced closer together so they could knock a bit of wood off the end of the ruler to save themselves some money and then charge you the same amount, you'd be pretty cross when you found out that all your measurements were actually wrong. It's critical with our equipment that is absolutely accurate, so that people know that they can trust that information and then make investment decisions. Because if you're going to retrofit all of the freezers and fridges in your entire estate of supermarkets, which has been done on a number of occasions based on the data from our meters, and that data originally was wrong, you could be making an investment which is way out by, you know, millions. So it has to be trustworthy and accurate. So everything is externally accredited, and we have all the sort of safety certificates. So it's UL accredited for the United States, CE for Europe, and of course we've got the UK CA now for Britain, and then there's a separate one for Australasia, which is called RCM.
Wow.
So yeah, that's pretty much, I hope, sums up what we do, why we do it. I suppose the only other thing I would mention is that for me personally, walking the talk is absolutely critical. So the way we operate is done on the basis of energy management and on the basis of environmental responsibility. So we get things delivered to us in boxes, for example. We take those boxes and we put the stuff in we're shipping, and it goes back out. We reuse the packaging. And if we have to buy extra packaging, we make sure it's all biodegradable. So a bubble wrap bag will not sit in, our bubble wrap bags will not sit in landfill for 100 years. They will just dissolve once they get in there within, you know, a couple of days, because the bacteria will be able to break them back down into the sort of natural cellulose that they're made from. Even our cleaning products are all natural cleaning products, so we're not putting any chemicals out into the system. Everything's recycled. We've got everybody off paper, everything's electronic, which I think is a critical thing to do. So yes, I think that's really important. I think if you're going to sell something and you're not doing it yourself, then you're kind of naff, really, if you see what I mean.
No, I completely agree. Could be congruent with what we do. Absolutely. No, it makes sense. And all that's going, all that across, everything you've described across the world is all going on here in Yorkshire. Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. 100%. And my staff are amazing. The people that we've got working for us, it's such a fabulous team. Everybody pulls together. And I think this is another aspect which I find really, really important, and I enjoy the fact that I can make this difference, which is to treat everybody as, you know, another person, understand them, know them, get them, and be there for them. So when personal tragedies hit, you know, there's no sort of rules set in. And there was one chap who's retired. He worked for us for his entire working life and then retired. And his mother was taken ill and she was in hospital. And I was telling him, please go and be with your mother. One day I came into the factory and walked in, and he was sat at his desk. I said, Chris, what are you doing here? What's happened? I was thinking, oh dear, his mother had passed away. And I needed to give him some more leave. And he said, oh, well, you know, I'm feeling a bit bad about taking so much time off. And I said, no, please, you must go and be with your mother. And I literally ordered him to go and leave. He went to the hospital, and she passed away a couple of hours later.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And it's not just big tragic things like that, but just the small details where you acknowledge the other people in the organization. And I'm not the one for going in being the big boss and, you know, pretending I know everything, because I am not technical. I don't write firmware. I can't design hardware. I couldn't for the life of me sit for hours like some of my people do hand soldering components on. You know, they like to do that. They find that meditative and it's calming, and they enjoy the fact they come in, they can do that and go home and leave it behind. But that would just absolutely kill me within about half an hour, because once I've got it, I need to go and do something else. So I'm a different kettle of fish. So what I'm bringing to the organisation is something else. It's not the same as everybody else. It's something different. And so I find it's important to be on the level with everybody else, so that if there's a change that's needed, I can go to them and say, you know, what do you think about this? And they can then say to me and feel comfortable with doing that. Well, Julia, actually, that's going to cause this problem. And then I can go and sort of say, oh, right, okay, so we need to find out how we can do what we need to do without that problem happening. And that sort of sense of collaboration I've always found is easier to have with people if you're on the level with them, rather than trying to be some sort of top-down person who's cleverer than them. You know, they like to wind me up by saying boss, the word boss, and looking at me with a twinkle in their eye, but I just twinkle back at them.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, could you tell us a little bit more about your own background and how you got into this business and why this business?
Okay, well, my background initially was in housing and development, so it was building related. I was working for a county council in administration, and then I was a sort of office junior, and I was sent out to get the milk. And it was in the days of community care, which I don't know, some people might not be old enough to remember community care, but it was when all the large institutions were closed down. And the care in the community for a lot of people involved sleeping on the streets. So there was a very high number of homeless people. And I found one day who didn't look like the others. I mean, he was covered in mud, and it turned out that he wasn't, you know, the standard homeless person, whatever that might be. You know, he wasn't living rough. He'd come out of a fire exit in a nursing home that somebody had left open by accident. And he just wandered off. He was completely senile. He didn't know his name or where he was. And he'd walked all the way to Bristol from Southampton. That's why he was caked in mud. And he just looked so out of place where he was. And I took him in, and that opened up this whole world of homelessness. I saw the sort of night shelter, and then helped him get into a hostel. Then I started volunteering there. So I decided to change careers and work in the voluntary housing sector. And to do that, I decided I'd get a degree first. So I went to the University of the West of England. I studied housing and development for 3 years, which involved a mixture of the social aspects of housing, but also the technical. I did 10 years working with homeless people, and I got completely burnt out and just decided, no, I've got to step away from this. And then I met Kris as I was trying to restructure my kind of CV, if you like, towards a more technical aspect. And I was doing some modules with the Open University. Basically, it was just called environment in those days. So we're talking about 23 years ago. And I started studying these modules, and it reminded me of how interested I'd been in things like the solar panels for housing, the way houses are constructed, the energy efficiency of them, and all that sort of thing, and how they interface and impact on the environment, and vice versa. And I met Kris, and he had this business which I've just described, and I had my daughter when she was 6 months old. He came home one day and said, you know, I don't really want to run the operations or the company anymore, so would you mind going in and being managing director? What? You know, I've never worked in a commercial or business type setting before. It was you know, local government, and then it was the voluntary sector. And I said, well, I'll go in and I'll have a look and see. Because I'd kind of been thinking more along the sort of solar kind of route at that point in time. But I absolutely loved the people when I went in there, and I got the products. I got the you know, the point of them, that they can have a real impact on reducing the energy consumption for organisations. I just sort of started, and then I just found that I just really enjoyed it, and I had all these ideas for products, so I started to sort of, you know, make a few changes, and the engineers were a bit sort of, well, you know, you're not an engineer, you know, what do you sort of know about it? But, you know, once they thought about the ideas, they were all on board, and then we sort of suddenly found we had a new portfolio of products. Well, not suddenly, they had to do an awful lot of work to design those. So yes, it became really enjoyable, and it opened up a whole new world that I hadn't ever come across before, you know, of engineering and design and standards, you know, having to get things tested. And it's just, I'm familiar enough with all of the aspects of the business to be able to manage it effectively without being a sort of specialist in any one, apart from obviously my own role. So yes, it's been a fascinating, very illuminating time, shall we say.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what are some of the biggest issues you've had to overcome as a business or personally? What are some of those challenges you faced?
Some of the staff that are responsible for this no longer work for us or have retired. It's not that I sacked them for doing this, but it was a long time ago, I have to say, in defense of my own company, and absolutely no one would do anything like this again ever nowadays, because people don't do this sort of thing now. But one of the first things they did when I joined is some bright spark found a rather sort of semi-pornographic photograph of what they thought I looked like with no clothes on, and then were sending it round the company internet. No, that was 19 years ago, and I think we've come an awfully long way since then. So the first thing I did was to ban any images of that nature, any of that type of material at all on the company internet. And I did have to work quite hard at getting some recognition for what I could bring to the organisation, because it was a male-orientated culture, very much so. There was one woman, well, actually there were two women working there. One was the cleaner who came in occasionally, and the other was the woman who did the sort of, you know, answering the phone, the books, the accounts. The rest of it was all men. Contrast that with now. My sales manager is a man, but my buyer, critical role, and the basically the operations manager, or woman who runs all the kind of engineering side of it, they're women. Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. So I didn't set out to do that, but it's just the way it happened to work out. And I was lucky enough to get one person in who was very technical, and then she proved to be absolutely brilliant. So she used to just test the designs of the designers, but then it turned out that she had this background actually as a CEO in India, and had a wealth of experience. And so I call her my right hand woman, and she actually seems to like that. And then another Indian lady applied who had a background actually much more technical, but it turned out that she was able to turn her hand to buying, and to challenge people on prices and get good deals and keep going back to them, but with that understanding of the you know, the requirements, technically speaking. So that was one challenge. I think it was balancing being part of really what has been a national and hopefully an international change in the views of women in the workplace and our place and what we can and can't do. I mean, that was an interesting sort of anecdotal story, but there has been a real shift as well. So we have this, you know, much better balanced workforce now. And I think the other challenges are presented by economic ups and downs, in terms of, you know, the company being around for 50 years. So it was around during the sort of the oil crisis in the 70s. And we're here again with a similar, not similar, but another crisis sort of, you know, brewing. And I think one of the things is that helps us get through, firstly, we're lucky enough to own our own building. I think that's been critical to us. I know a lot. I feel very, very sort of sad for a lot of companies who've gone under or are facing immense challenges, you know, through COVID recently, where they've had leases and they've had to pay the leases even though they're not using the buildings, that kind of thing, and they can't get out of them. So I think that's been a core thing that's really helped us get through. So ups and downs have not been impacted by rental payments that we've had to carry on making where we haven't had the income coming in because of, you know, massive economic downturns. But the other thing about an economic downturn is that people look at their costs. That's the first thing you do. You look at your costs and you think, how can I reduce my outgoing so that I can keep going and get out of this problem. And one of those ways is, of course, looking at your bills.
Yes.
So in fact, when there is an economic downturn or price rises or the same at the same time, it can actually be good for business, for us. We can help organizations get through those difficult times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And what do you say are some of the most important things you've learned in business as you've developed?
Oh, there's so much. I mean, apart from the sort of technical kind of information which I knew nothing about before I joined the organization, which by the way I find fascinating and absolutely interesting. I've turned into quite a nerd about those type of things. Actually, it's quite sad in a way, but I've learned a lot more about business per se, in the sense of the role that it plays, and I think it plays a role which is much broader, and I think business people can play a broader role in the way they kind of think about their business and what their business is actually doing. So as a consumer, if I buy something, I'm just looking at that thing. I might be interested in the labeling. I might be choosing between different companies if I'm going to buy something because I've got a set of criteria. They might be pricing, but I might be interested in the environmental impact, the social impact, you know, what kind of company is it? And I might decide to choose something that's slightly more expensive or not quite what I want because I've got other criteria. So what I've realized as somebody who's inside a business rather than being outside it and considering what businesses do is that we can make a real impact in the way that we operate, in the way that we think.
Yeah.
And I've tried to bring that to ND metering solutions in the way that we interact with the environment in everything that we do, in the way that we interact with communities and each other as people, and also try to take a role in the debates that are going on. So I've chosen to join a couple of the all-party parliamentary groups, which are PRASEG, for example, which is a group concerned with energy and renewables, and another one similarly to do with the basically energy industries. And I've chosen to engage with those because it means I can take a point of view. I can engage with other people who are talking to MPs and ministers and people who are making policy decisions, and try to feed in how things look to us, because they look very different to us as an SME and a manufacturing company to how they look to a very, very large multinational company, or how they look to a company that isn't manufacturing, that's doing something else, for example. And I think just playing that part, deciding to engage at that level is very, very important. Now, how much notice they take of me is another matter. But honestly, if you don't put your hand up and make your point, and mine will it almost invariably be about climate change and our basically broader environmental impacts, then you know, I think you almost have a responsibility to do that, to speak up and to put your point of view, because if you don't, it you know, then criticizing what happens when you haven't taken the opportunity to make some input into the processes. I think it waters down what you're saying. So
absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense. And what would you say you've learned about yourself as you developed as the MD of the business?
Well, I've learned that I can do this job because, well, the company still has legs after 19 years of me being managing director. I mean, it's not something I would have said I had the confidence to have done in the first place. I mean, when my husband said, "Could you come in and run it?" because I don't want to do it anymore, I sort of didn't really actually think I was going to go and do it. I just thought I'll go and have a look, and then I'll have a look round, work out why I can't do it, and then tell him, and then you'll have to go and find somebody else, and I'll go and do the other thing I was going to do. I was going to do at the time, but I just found that actually by asking questions openly and being open to what people have to say, taking on board what they say, I was learning masses, and they could also learn about me from the way I responded to them. And so things just grew from that point in time. And I found that suddenly looked around and thought, oh, I'm actually doing this. And it wasn't something I decided to do or desired to do or ever thought about doing, certainly not in the private sector. But I have to say, it's been by far the most enjoyable job I've had, and very, very rewarding. So I think, I think what I've learned is that I had more ability to change and adapt and apply skills that I already had to new situations, and to make them work. And I think it's sort of trusting in yourself and trusting in other people, that you can make things work. You might have a massive disaster, that something might have gone dreadfully wrong, but you can think about a few scenarios, put them to people, and before you know it, everyone's pulling together and we're all chugging along again. So brilliant. Yeah, brilliant.
Well, that's great to hear. And so look, I guess looking a little bit forwards, what do you see? What does the future look like for your business, and what challenges might you address or see, if any?
I think the future for us as a company is very good, because I think the emphasis on energy management can only get stronger, particularly in the current environment. Now, I'm not glad that it's come to that, because for the reasons that it has at all. It's very sad that we've had to have such a dreadful situation arise before the security of our energy has been properly considered. It's not something I've only thought about because of what's happening in Ukraine. It's been an argument I've been putting forward for the last 19 years since I've been in this role, and have understood the impact that energy efficiency can have. I've always said that this country has the resources to be completely self-sufficient in its energy. We've got more wind here, more than you could ever use, plus obviously the solar, and there isn't any excuse for bringing it in. There isn't any excuse for importing it, and I've never understood why we've continued to do that and put ourselves at risk. But also, the cost of doing it is not just financial, it's also obviously environmental and social as well. And don't forget the health problems that are caused by particulates in the air from burning carbon-based fuels as well. So they're very real and direct and happening now. We keep going with our message, we keep going with our products, but I do expect the uptake to increase, and not just in the UK, but internationally as well. What I hope is that there will be a much stronger emphasis on energy efficiency. We sometimes call it the first fuel, because if you, for example, were going to consider installing solar panels, you could spend a lot more money on those solar panels if you design your system around what you're currently using unnecessarily, if you haven't first done an energy management exercise and worked out how much you can reduce your consumption. And people are very often wowed and excited and very surprised to find out how much they're wasting and what they could do, quite simply, really, in a lot of cases, to reduce it. But if you don't see it, and you can't see electricity, you can't. You can't really see gas either. You can smell it, but you can't see it. But you can't see it unless you're actually measuring it and watching it on a piece of software. And so it's not the only way to reduce. There are obvious things people can do, and I hope they do those things. And if necessary, don't buy meters if you don't need them. I'm not trying to just sell meters, but I'm just saying that there are no reasons whatsoever to not do energy management. There's no excuse for any organisation not to be applying themselves to it. And I really hope that everyone will take this up and think very, very carefully about it, put their mind to it, You'll certainly be very glad when you've saved a lot of money and you can see how that's going. So every pound, remember, that you don't spend is directly on the bottom line.
Yep.
Every pound you invest in sales is a pound minus your cost. So it's a very, very worthwhile thing to do.
Yep.
So that's how I would sum up.
Brilliant, brilliant. And what would you say to anyone that's thinking of going into business right now?
Oh, do it. I mean, there's a lot of bad press about businesses, but there's no reason whatsoever why businesses have to be like the kind of businesses that the bad press is about. A business can be absolutely good. It can be fundamentally honest. It can do the right thing every day, all day. It can employ people in a humane and person-centered way that values each of those individuals and gives them a really good time at work. So they look forward to coming to work and enjoy it. And you can put out products or services which are really genuinely benefiting people. And if you want to do that and you go into business, you're then making a direct good contribution to society, to the environment, and to yourselves and each other. So I would say anyone considering it, if get on with it.
Brilliant. Very, very, very passionate and very wise words. And so thank you for that. And finally, Julia, just as a bit of fun, what advice would you give to an 18-year-old you if you could?
Ooh, I would say to my 18-year-old self, start a business. Brilliant. Basically, yes, because you have so much freedom. There are obviously constraints, money being a main one, but you have so much freedom if you have a business to do and to fulfill, your own dreams and what you really want to see happening. And you can really make things happen in a good way. And have a good impact on other people. So that would definitely be my advice.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Julie. It's been really fascinating, and I can see your passion for what you do and why you do it, and the wider reach of the value office is just very, very clear to see, and it's great. It was been great to meet you and talk to you today.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you.